The man who judged with his heart. The courtroom was silent. Only the ticking of the old wall clock dared interrupt the stillness. Its rhythm echoed against the wood-paneled walls like a heartbeat, steady, patient, eternal. The man who sat behind the bench was not just any judge. His name was Frank Caprio, and for decades he had carried the weight of justice on his shoulders, not as a weapon, but as a light. That morning, sunlight slipped through the narrow windows of Providence Municipal Court, falling gently across the mahogany bench where Judge Caprio sat. He wasn't young anymore. The lines on his face told stories of laughter, loss, and 1,000 verdicts. But his eyes, warm, calm, unshaken, still carried that quiet compassion that made even the most frightened defendant feel seen. Outside, the city stirred with its usual rhythm. Car horns, hurried footsteps, fragments of ordinary life. Inside, though, it was sacred, because inside this courtroom, something remarkable often happened. People came here expecting punishment, and instead, they found humanity. A small elderly man shuffled in first, guided by his trembling hands. His back was bent, his hat slightly crooked, and the papers in his grasp shook with age. Behind him, the bailiff announced, "Case number 1, Victor Keller, charged with speeding in the school zone." The judge glanced up. "Good morning, sir," he said softly. "Good morning, Judge," came the reply, barely above a whisper. The old man looked nervous, but his eyes were clear. He was 96 years old. "You're charged with school zone violation," the judge read. "That means you were exceeding the limit in a school area. How do you plead?" The man hesitated, then said, "Judge, I drive slow. I'm 96 years old. I only drive when I have to. That day, I was taking my boy for blood work. He's handicapped. He's got cancer." For a moment, no one spoke. The air grew heavy with quiet respect. Even the officers who had heard 100 excuses before seemed to lean forward, listening differently this time. Caprio set the papers down and looked at the man, not as a defendant, but as a father. "You were taking your son to the doctor?" "Yes, sir." "How old is your son?" 63. "And you're still taking care of him?" "Yes, Judge. Every 2 weeks." The room was silent again, and then the judge said something simple but unforgettable. "You're a good man. You're what America is all about." That was the moment everything shifted. Viewers around the world would later say they felt their hearts tighten when they watched that clip, because justice, for a brief moment, looked like kindness. And in that courtroom, everyone, from the officers to the viewers behind their screens, understood that mercy can be a verdict too, but that was only the beginning. In the days that followed, the courtroom saw faces from every corner of life: the grieving, the lost, the hopeful, and the afraid. Each one came with a story, and each story tested what it truly meant to be fair. There was a mother, her hands clutching folded papers and unpaid parking tickets from years ago. Her eyes were red, her voice unsteady. When asked why she hadn't paid her fines, she hesitated, and then broke down. Her son had been killed the year before. She was fighting not only her grief, but eviction, poverty, and endless bureaucracy. "They took my check because my son owed money," she said, trembling. "He was already gone, Judge, but they took it anyway." As she spoke, the courtroom filled with that heavy kind of silence, the kind that happens when people remember their own heartbreaks. The judge didn't rush her. He didn't cut her off. He just listened, and when she was finished, he looked down at the papers, then back up at her. "I've heard many stories in this courtroom," he said gently, "but yours is one that reminds us how fragile life can be." He reduced her fine to $50. She opened her purse and quietly whispered, "I have it on me." When she handed him the money, he asked, "Will that leave you with anything?" She shook her head. $5. He paused and smiled softly. "I'm not going to leave you with $5. I'm going to dismiss everything." The woman wept, and in that instant, you could feel the room breathe again. That's what made Judge Caprio different. For him, justice wasn't about power, it was about balance. He weighed not just the evidence, but the human cost. Every verdict became a mirror, reflecting who we are when we choose to understand instead of condemn. But then came another story. This time, it was a Syrian immigrant family, a mother, father, and their little girl, no older than 8. The mother barely spoke English. The judge smiled and asked gently, "Would you like your daughter to help translate?" The little girl nodded, proud but nervous. She stood on her tiptoes at the microphone and said, "My mom was speeding because I was sick." Everyone smiled, even the officers, but the judge wasn't done. He invited the girl to his bench and asked, "What's your name?" "Masa." "And what do you want to be when you grow up?" "A doctor." "A doctor? We're going to need you someday." Then, with a twinkle in his eye, the judge handed her the gavel. "Now, Masa, you be the judge. Should your mother pay the fine, or should we let her go?" The little girl thought for a moment, then said, $50. The courtroom erupted in laughter. Her mother covered her face in disbelief, but then the judge leaned closer and whispered, "Would you like to reconsider?" Masa nodded. "Okay, how much now?" "Nothing." "Nothing?" Then bang the gavel and say, "Case dismissed." "Case dismissed." The laughter gave way to applause. But beneath it, there was something deeper, pride. Because this wasn't just about tickets or traffic lights. It was about what kind of values we pass to the next generation: honesty, kindness, understanding, and the courage to forgive. And yet, not every case brought laughter. Some brought tears. One morning, a man came in looking defeated. His clothes were worn, his voice quiet. He told the judge he had been living in his car until the city had it booted and towed away. Now, all his belongings, his clothes, his only shelter, were locked inside that car. "I can't pay, Judge," he said softly. "I don't have anything." Caprio leaned back, studying him for a moment. Then he said, "We have something here called the Philomena Fund. It's named after my mother. It's a fund people donate to so that we can help those who need it most." The man blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "We're going to use that fund," the judge said. "We'll pay the fee. You'll get your car back." The man broke down crying. For the first time in months, he wasn't invisible. And when he left the courtroom, there was something different in his walk, a quiet dignity, the kind you can only see in someone who's just been given hope. But then, something happened that no one expected. Judge Caprio began receiving letters from strangers across the world, retired officers, students, teachers, even children, sending small donations, handwritten notes, and messages of thanks. One man wrote, "Judge, I'm unemployed myself, but I'm sending $25. Please use it to help someone who's having a tough time." And he did. Each time a person came in burdened by life, the judge reached into that fund, not for charity, but for justice. Because sometimes fairness meant lifting someone up instead of pushing them down. Through every case, every tear, every laugh, one truth became clear. This courtroom was more than a place of law. It was a sanctuary, where mercy met accountability, where truth met compassion, and where even the smallest act of kindness could change a life forever. As the day drew to a close, the judge leaned back in his chair. The courtroom was empty now. Sunlight painted the floor gold, and the echoes of the day lingered like soft music. He glanced at the framed photograph on his desk. His mother, Philomena, smiling. The same woman whose name now helped countless others. "You taught me well, Ma," he whispered. "Justice isn't about punishment. It's about people." Outside, the bells of Providence chimed. And somewhere, another person who had once stood trembling in front of him was now standing taller, because one man had chosen to see their heart before their mistake. In a world too often divided by judgment, Judge Frank Caprio had reminded everyone that mercy, too, is a form of justice. That compassion is not weakness, and that one small courtroom in Rhode Island could hold lessons big enough for the whole world. The stories that unfolded there, of fathers, mothers, children, and strangers, would ripple far beyond those walls. And though he's gone now, his voice still echoes in every verdict that chooses kindness over cruelty. Because in the end, the greatest judge wasn't the one who punished hardest, but the one who listened with his heart. The morning light returned to courtroom like a quiet visitor, soft, uncertain, almost shy. The benches creaked as people shuffled in, holding papers, tickets and stories too heavy to fit in envelopes. Judge Caprio straightened his robe and sighed softly. He'd seen thousands of faces over the years, but somehow each one still felt new. Each one carried a different kind of pain. That day's docket was long. Routine cases on paper, but human stories in reality. The grieving mother. The first was a woman named Andrea. She stood at the podium clutching a stack of old parking tickets, her fingers trembling slightly. Her hair was pulled back, her eyes tired, not from sleepless nights, but from sleepless years. You have several unpaid violations, the clerk read, some as far back as 2004. Caprio adjusted his glasses and looked up. Ma'am, can you tell me what happened here? Andrea hesitated. Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. And then, softly, they did. Judge, my son was killed last year. I've had a hard time keeping up with things. They stopped my Social Security because they said he owed money. I didn't even know about these tickets. The courtroom froze. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to fade. She went on, her voice breaking, her grief raw and unpolished. She told the court how she'd gone to fix the mistake, how every errand for help had cost her another ticket, another reminder of what she'd lost. I had to go to eviction court. My landlord was trying to throw me out. When I came outside, I found another ticket on my windshield. I couldn't catch a break. The judge's face softened. He looked not at her file, but into her pain. I can see it's been a difficult year, he said quietly. We all lose people we love, but losing a child. He didn't finish the sentence. Some pain doesn't need words. He reviewed her total, hundreds of dollars in fines she could never afford. How much can you pay? $50, she whispered. That's all I have. I'll have 5 left after that. The judge leaned forward. I'm not going to leave you with $5. I'm going to dismiss everything. A tear slipped down Andrea's cheek. And then another. The courtroom was still again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was reverent. Thank you, Judge, she whispered. Good luck to you, he said. And may life be kinder from here. But deep down, Caprio knew kindness was rare currency, and some people were running out of it. The immigrant father. Next came a man named Amadou, a recent immigrant who had only received his driver's license 6 months earlier. His accent was thick, his hands rough with work. He looked nervous as he stepped forward, his wife and 2 small children watching from the back row. You're charged with speeding, Caprio said gently. How do you plead? Judge, I did not see the sign. I thought it was 30 miles per hour. He explained that in his country, traffic laws were different. He had studied hard for his U.S. test, but English wasn't easy. His wife joined him at the podium, confirming his story. Their honesty was disarming, simple, direct, without excuse. Caprio nodded. You said your children were in the car? Yes, Judge. He smiled faintly. Bring them up here. The 2 kids shuffled forward, a boy and a girl. They stared up at the bench, wide-eyed. Now, said the judge, your father is accused of speeding. I'm going to ask you both, guilty or not guilty. The boy looked at his father, then at the judge. Guilty, he said softly. The courtroom erupted in laughter. Even the bailiff smiled. The father put his hands over his face. Judge, he doesn't understand. Caprio chuckled. Oh, I think he understands perfectly. He's honest, that's good. Then the judge's tone shifted, soft but firm. Sir, when you drive, remember that you carry your family's safety with you. And yet, I believe this was misunderstanding. I'm dismissing the case. But next time, drive as if your children's eyes are watching, because they are. The father bowed slightly, tears in his eyes. Thank you, Judge. God bless you. Good luck, my friend. Welcome to America, Caprio said. But as the family left, the judge sat quietly for a moment. He knew the law had limits, but compassion didn't. The struggling worker. Later that afternoon, a man named Daniel Murray entered the courtroom. His clothes were worn, his shoes frayed. He carried no folder, no lawyer, just exhaustion. The clerk began reading the charges. 7 violations, including a red light infraction and a school zone ticket. When the judge asked how much he could pay, Daniel hesitated. I have 92 cents in my account. 92 cents? Caprio repeated. Yes, Your Honor. I walked from East Providence this morning, about 5 miles. I'll walk back too. There was a pause, not of disbelief, but of empathy. Caprio leaned forward, his voice softening. You walked 5 miles to be here? Yes, sir. A faint smile crossed the judge's face. That's commitment. Daniel laughed nervously. I got my running shoes on, Judge. But behind the laughter was fatigue, the kind that clings to a person's bones. Then the judge reached for a letter that had arrived that very morning. Mr. Murray, someone sent me this. A man named Frank Damasio. He's unemployed himself, but he sent $25 to our Philomena fund, asking me to help someone who's having a tough time. Today, that person is you. Daniel blinked, unable to speak. Use to take an Uber home. The judge said, You've done enough walking. Tears welled in Daniel's eyes. Judge, I can't accept. You can and you will, Caprio said firmly, but I'll ask one thing in return. When you're able, help someone else. Don't forget how this feels. I won't, Judge. I promise. And in that moment, a man with 92 cents left in his account became the richest soul in the room. The student. Later, laughter returned to the courtroom, the kind that lightens the air after too many heavy hearts. A young woman named Carrie Hopkins stood nervously before the bench. You're charged with parking during an emergency, the judge said. Yes, Your Honor, she replied, but I didn't know how much snow we were getting. I'm a student and I'm poor. The courtroom chuckled. Even Caprio smiled. Who told you it would snow? My parents, she admitted. Ah, not the meteorologist, your parents. Her humor was unintentional, but it filled the room with warmth. Then, as she explained how she'd been told, how the towing company had told her come to court and act like a broke student, Caprio raised an eyebrow. And they charged you the full fee? Yes, sir. They told you to ask me for mercy while they took your money. Interesting business model. The room laughed again. Carrie, he said kindly, you've paid enough. The ticket is dismissed. Thank you, Your Honor. And Carrie, he added, honesty looks good on you. Keep it. She smiled, a small, grateful smile, the kind people wear when they realize someone finally saw them as a person, not a problem. The homeless man. The next defendant walked differently, slowly, almost cautiously. His name was Christian Arroyo. He was homeless. His car, his home, had been booted overnight. All my things are in that car, he said quietly. My clothes, my blankets, everything. How much can you pay? The judge asked. Nothing, sir. There was no defense, no performance, just truth. Caprio sat back, the weight of the moment heavy in his eyes. Christian, we're going to use the Philomena fund again. You don't have to pay a cent. You'll get your car back today. For a long second, Christian said nothing. Then his face crumpled, and he wept. Judge, you just gave me my home back. The room was silent. Even the bailiff turned away for a moment. Caprio simply nodded. Good luck, my friend. You deserve a chance. And that day, a courtroom became a shelter. Every face that came through those doors carried a story. Some were desperate, some hopeful, some guilty. But all of them, reminded the judge that the line between right and wrong wasn't always drawn in black and white. Sometimes it was drawn in tears, laughter, and the quiet courage of survival. But then something happened that changed even him. A mother came in one morning with 5 children, clinging to her arms. The youngest wore a firefighter hat. The courtroom chuckled. But beneath the laughter, the judge saw something else, fatigue and fear. He leaned forward. Who are these young folks? My kids, she said. All of them. All 5. The judge smiled. You've got your hands full. Let's see how they handle justice. He called one of the boys to the bench. Is your mom guilty or not guilty? The boy hesitated, then whispered, Not guilty. Good answer. The judge smiled. Shall I fine her or let her go? Fine her. The boy grinned. The room erupted again. How much? Caprio asked. $50. And if I offered jail? Yes. The laughter was contagious. the boy's honesty pure. But when the fun subsided, the judge turned serious again. "Your mother works hard," he said gently. "Sometimes parents make mistakes because they're trying to do their best. We're going to dismiss this case." The woman's eyes filled with tears as her children clapped. In that moment, the courtroom wasn't a place of punishment. It was a lesson in love. Outside, the sun dipped lower over Providence. The clock ticked again, just as it had that morning. Steady, patient, eternal. Inside, the man behind the bench closed his folder. He knew tomorrow would bring more faces, more stories, more tests of compassion. But he also knew something else, something deeper. That real justice didn't live in the pages of law books. It lived in the moments between sentences, in mercy, in understanding, and in the courage to see the good still left in people. The next morning began with rain. Heavy drops traced slow paths down the courtroom windows, the kind of gray light that makes even strong men quiet. Judge Frank Caprio arrived early, his robe folded neatly across one arm. Before taking his seat, he stood for a long moment by the bench, watching the empty rows. Another day, he thought, another test of the heart, the man who fought his own silence. The first case seemed ordinary, a red light violation at a busy intersection. The defendant, a soft-spoken man in his 30s, stood nervously twisting his cap. "In that location," he stammered, "there's mad lights, Judge." I got confused. Caprio raised an eyebrow. "You got confused?" "Yes, sir. Too many lights. I was guilty but confused." The courtroom chuckled. Even the officer smiled. Yet something in the man's tone caught Caprio's attention. It wasn't defiance. It was honesty. "Let me explain why you're confused," the judge said, leaning forward. "Two lanes share a green light, but the left turn arrow is red. You saw green and went, 'Anyone could make that mistake.'" He paused, then offered a rare grin. "I think the city's traffic engineer owes you an apology." Case dismissed. The man's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" Caprio said. "But next time, don't let confusion be your co-pilot." The gallery laughed again, but beneath the humor was a truth that will return again and again. Sometimes the fairest verdict is understanding. The mother in the cough. A young mother named Casey Munoz was next. Her eyes were red from crying before she even reached the podium. "You have a red light violation," Caprio began gently. "Where were you headed that day?" Her voice cracked. "The hospital. Judge, my daughter couldn't breathe." She lifted her phone with trembling hands. On the screen, a small girl lay in a hospital bed, an oxygen mask covering her face. She'd woken up with a fever. Then her throat closed. "I didn't even think. I just drove." The judge exhaled slowly. "Was she in the car?" "Yes, sir." Caprio nodded to the officer beside him. "Inspector Quinn, I think we all know what any parent would have done." The inspector smiled softly. "Judge, I have gone around that corner on 2 wheels." Caprio turned back to Casey. "Ma'am, I'm dismissing this. Use whatever money you have for your children. That's where it belongs." Casey's tears came freely now. "Thank you, Judge. Thank you so much." As she walked away, the courtroom stayed silent. No applause, no murmurs, just quiet respect for a mother's love and a judge who understood it. But inside, Caprio felt something shift. He'd faced thousands of stories, yet each one left a mark he never quite erased. Compassion could heal others, but also exhausted the heart that gave it. The 9 red lights. Later that week came Gladys Rodriguez, a young woman with trembling hands and 9 violations. 9 red light tickets, 9 small windows into chaos. 9. Caprio repeated. "That's almost a parade." She swallowed hard. "Judge, I was in a bad relationship. He used to chase me. I was running from him with my daughter in the car." The room stilled. Caprio's face softened. "How old is your daughter?" 9. He nodded slowly. "And she's safe now?" "Yes, sir. I left him." Inspector Quinn quietly checked the files. "Judge, there were reports of damage. It matches what she said." Caprio looked back at Gladys. "You know, Many people come here with excuses. You came here with courage. He could not dismiss them all. The law had to breathe somewhere. Your total fine is $350, he said. But I'm going to use donations from our Philomena fund to cover most of it. You'll owe $125. She gasped. Judge, can I hug you? Come on up here, he said with a smile. When she wrapped her arms around him, the courtroom forgot it was a courthouse at all. It felt like a family trying to heal. The veteran and the promise. Days later, an elderly veteran approached the bench, cane tapping softly against the floor. His ticket was small, a parking violation, but his pride was large. I served 25 years, Judge. I never asked for favors. Caprio listened carefully. You shouldn't have to. What happened? I parked wrong while visiting a buddy at the VA hospital. We were remembering the ones we lost. For a moment, Caprio said nothing. He looked at the man's trembling hand resting on the cane, the faded tattoo on his wrist, the silence in his eyes. You've paid enough, soldier, the judge said quietly. Case dismissed with gratitude. The old man straightened, saluted shakily, and whispered, Thank you for remembering us. Caprio returned the salute, his throat tight. And somewhere deep inside, he wondered how a world could forget men like that so easily. The boy who would be a farmer. Another day brought laughter again. A 6-year-old girl named Sophia sat beside her mother at the defendant's table, swinging her legs. The judge invited her up. What do you want to be when you grow up? A farmer, she said proudly. A farmer, the judge repeated, pretending shock. We'll all need you one day. He explained that her mother had a ticket for $85. Should I make her pay, Sophia, or should I give her a break? The little girl frowned in deep concentration. Charge her $100. Laughter filled the room. The mother covered her face. Caprio chuckled, shaking his head. You drive a hard bargain, young lady. He tried again. How about $50? Yes. Or nothing? No. Her mother groaned. The judge leaned in. What if she keeps the money to buy you a toy? Sophia thought, then smiled. $20. Caprio laughed. This is the toughest judge I've ever worked with. Finally, he turned to the mother. Ma'am, I'm dismissing the case, but you better get that little one her toy. The courtroom applauded, but as the laughter faded, Caprio glanced toward the child. If only every child learned early that fairness begins with love, he thought. The way to compassion. By now the stories were blending together. Joy and sorrow weaving through each day like threads in a single tapestry. But with every act of mercy came a question that haunted him after the cameras shut off. Where does mercy end? When does compassion become permission? Some nights he'd walk alone through quiet streets of Providence, the old courthouse behind him, replaying faces in his mind. The mother clutching her purse, the immigrant bowing in thanks, the veteran saluting through tears. He wanted to believe that kindness always healed, yet the burden of deciding who deserved it, that was the silent price of his calling. The couple and the 3/10 of a second. One rainy afternoon, laughter returned again, this time from an older couple. Linda Fields marched up first, her husband trailing behind like a man heading to confession. Judge, she began, I got this ticket, but he was driving. I'm not guilty, her husband protested. He is, she fired back. The courtroom erupted in chuckles. Caprio smiled. So you came here to testify against your husband? Well, Judge, I looked at the video. He went through that light. The judge pulled up the footage and froze it. 3/10 of a second red, he said. That's how close it was. Linda's expression softened. Then maybe he's not guilty after all. 43 years of marriage? Caprio asked. Yes, Judge. Then I'm giving you both the benefit of the doubt. Case dismissed. But, sir, you owe your wife dinner. The room roared with laughter again, but behind the humor was tenderness, the kind of gentle understanding that keeps love alive long after the law stops caring. The judge alone. That evening, after everyone had left, Caprio remained at his bench. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above him. He opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of letters. Thank you notes Photos, small donations folded inside envelopes. He read one aloud. Dear Judge, I saw your kindness on TV. My husband and I live on a pension, but here's $10. Please use it to help someone who needs a miracle. He set it down gently. The rain outside had stopped, but inside, the storm still lingered, and the ache of knowing that every day, more people would walk through those doors, hoping that justice still had a heart. He looked up at the empty seats, the space where laughter and tears had mixed all week, and whispered to himself, I can't fix the world, but maybe I can heal one life at a time. Then he reached for his gavel, tapped it once against the bench, and the sound echoed like a heartbeat in the quiet hall. Night had fallen heavy over Providence. A late winter storm rattled the courthouse windows as a janitor's vacuum hummed faintly in the distance. Judge Frank Caprio sat alone at his bench, files stacked like bricks before him. Each folder carried a name, a life, a moment when the world had gone wrong. He rubbed his eyes, exhausted. For years, compassion had come easily, but lately it had begun to ache. The next morning would bring his most difficult case yet, the woman with nowhere left to fall. She entered quietly, coat too thin for the cold, hands trembling around a crumpled citation. Her name was Melissa Turner, and her record was long. Multiple unpaid tickets, a suspended license, and one last notice before jail. Caprio had seen the type before, or thought he had. Ms. Turner, he began, you've missed 3 previous hearings. Why today? Her voice was barely a whisper. Because I finally found a ride. The courtroom chuckled softly, but Caprio didn't. What's been happening in your life? She hesitated, then spoke in fragments. Eviction, sleeping in her car, losing custody of her children, a job that vanished overnight. Her story tumbled out like broken glass. I kept thinking if I could just pay 1 ticket, maybe they'd give me my car back. But the fees doubled, and I just gave up. Caprio's eyes fell to the paper. $1, 200 owed. Even if he wiped it clean, she had nowhere to sleep. Do you have family? My parents passed. My kids are with their grandmother. Do you have work? Not yet. I've been walking to interviews. The silence felt endless. Even Inspector Quinn shifted uncomfortably. Caprio sighed. You know, Melissa, sometimes the law feels like a hammer looking for nails. But people aren't nails. They bend, they break. He tapped the file once. I'll tell you what, we'll clear the fines, but you're not walking home. I'll have someone from social services meet you here. She blinked, stunned. Why would you do that? Because you came, he said softly. Most don't. When she left, the courtroom was silent. The bailiff whispered, Judge, you okay? Caprio nodded slowly, but the weight in his eyes said otherwise. The day the camera stopped, that afternoon, during a short recess, he sat alone in chambers. The TV crews who filmed Caught in Providence had packed up early. The hall outside was quiet. He picked up his mother's photograph from his desk. You always knew what to say, Ma, he murmured. What do I tell them when kindness isn't enough? He remembered a case from years ago, a young man, barely 20, who had lied to his face. Caprio had believed him, reduced the fine, and later learned the man had reoffended the same week. The memory burned still. Have I made them too soft? He whispered. Or have I simply refused to give up on them? The rain beat harder against the windows. For the first time in years, the man known as America's nicest judge wondered if the world still deserved his gentleness. The veteran's daughter. The next case was small on paper. Failure to appear. But when the door opened, a teenage girl entered alone. Your Honor, she said, voice trembling. My father couldn't come. He's in the hospital. Caprio leaned forward. Who is your father? Sergeant Paul Grayson. The citation's in his name. He's a disabled vet. She handed him a photo. Her father in uniform, smile proud, eyes alive. Then another photo, hospital tubes, skin pale. The same man diminished. He always paid his tickets, Judge. Always. But the last one came while he was in treatment. I didn't want him to get in trouble. Caprio swallowed hard. How old are you? 16. She had walked there in the rain. No coat, just duty. You remind me of my daughter when she was your age. he said softly. I'm dismissing your father's case. Tell him the city thanks him for his service. The girl nodded, tears spilling freely. Thank you, Judge. You're the first person who's listened. As she left, Caprio's gaze followed her out the door and lingered on the empty bench beside her, the seat where a father should have been. The breaking of the heart. By midday, the courtroom was full again. Cameras rolled once more. The docket moved quickly until one case stopped everything. A man in his 40s entered wearing a delivery uniform, boots soaked through with slush. He looked calm, almost too calm. Name: Michael Rios. You have 9 unpaid violations, Caprio read, including a red light in a school zone. Yes, Judge. I was late for work. My boss said if I was late again, I'd be fired. Were their children present? Yes, sir. The air shifted. For the first time that day, Caprio's tone hardened. Mr. Rios, that school zone exists to protect children. You risked lives for a job. I've got 2 kids, Judge. If I lose my job, they don't eat. The courtroom froze, justice and survival staring each other down. Caprio sat back. Every instinct in him wanted to forgive, but this time, forgiveness could cost lives. Do you understand why this is difficult for me? Yes, Judge. I want to help you, but I can't excuse endangering children. The man's shoulders sank. Then I'll take the fine. For a long moment, Caprio said nothing. Then quietly, Inspector Quinn, reduce it by half. The officer nodded. Caprio looked up again. Mr. Rios, this isn't punishment. It's a lesson. If you ever find yourself choosing between speed and safety, remember this conversation. I will, Judge. When the man left, the courtroom stayed heavy. Mercy had met its boundary, and it hurt. The judge's prayer. That night, Caprio didn't go straight home. He walked to St. Mary's Cathedral, the same church his mother had taken him to as a boy. The lights inside glowed dimly. The pews smelled of wood and candle wax. He knelt, not as a judge, but as a man who feared he'd given all he could. Lord, he whispered, help me see the line between mercy and madness. Help me know when to forgive and when to be strong. Outside, snow began to fall again, coating the city in quiet white. He sat there for a long time, listening to the silence, until finally he felt a calm he hadn't known in months. When he stood, he knew what tomorrow would bring. One last case that would restore his faith or break it forever. The morning after, sunlight returned the next day, pure and sharp, bouncing off the courthouse steps. Reporters had gathered, sensing a story. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Caprio entered slowly, each step deliberate. The bailiff announced, "Case of Daniel Murray back again." The audience murmured. The man with 92 cents had returned. But this time, he carried an envelope. "Judge," Daniel said, voice steady, "I got a job. First paycheck came yesterday. I wanted to give this back." He placed $25 on the bench, the exact amount once gifted from a stranger. Caprio blinked hard. "You walked 5 miles to pay this?" "No, sir." Daniel smiled. "I took an Uber. You taught me that." The courtroom erupted in soft laughter and tears. Caprio stood, his voice trembling. "Mr. Murray, you just paid the finest debt of all, the debt of gratitude. Consider the account settled." Applause filled the room. The judge tapped his gavel once, fighting emotion. The man who had doubted whether mercy still mattered finally had his answer. That evening, Caprio returned to his empty chambers. On his desk lay the photograph of his mother and a fresh note from the clerk. "Judge, we received 300 letters today from viewers around the world. They say you restored their faith in humanity." He smiled softly, tears glistening. "Maybe," he whispered. "Faith was never lost. It just needed someone to remind it." He reached for the gavel one last time, let it rest against his palm, and closed his eyes. Outside, the city lights flickered like candles in the snow, and in that quiet glow, a weary man found peace, knowing that even at the breaking point, mercy had not broken him. The morning sun streamed to the courthouse windows like a spotlight. The day was crisp, Yet inside, the air was heavy with anticipation. Word spread that Judge Frank Caprio would hear some of the most difficult cases yet, cases that had challenged both law and heart. The courtroom was full, officers, clerks, families, and a handful of reporters who sensed the extraordinary. Cameras from Caught in Providence were ready, but they would capture only the surface. The real story, as always, was deeper. Caprio adjusted his robe, cleared his throat, and opened the first case of the day. His eyes scanned the room, landing on faces that had become familiar over the weeks. Daniel Murray's moment. Daniel Murray, the man who had once walked 5 miles with 92 cents in his account, approached the bench again. This time, his posture was upright, his eyes clear. "Judge, I wanted you to know I've started paying it forward," he said softly. "I've helped 3 people in my neighborhood, all because of what you taught me." Caprio leaned forward, a smile breaking across his face. "Daniel, this is exactly why we do what we do. Justice isn't only about rules. It's about what people learn from them. You've turned gratitude into action." He picked up his gavel and tapped it once against the bench. "Case dismissed. Your lesson is complete." The audience quietly applauded. Some wiped tears from their eyes. For a man who had once had nothing, this moment symbolized the power of mercy given at the right time. The grieving mother's redemption. Next, Andrea, the grieving mother, stepped forward. Caprio looked at her face and remembered the first time she had come to court. The memory of her trembling hands and red eyes was still vivid. "You've been managing well, I hear," he said. "I am, Judge," she replied. "And my life, it's finally moving forward." Caprio reviewed her paperwork. The fines were long gone, the tickets forgiven, yet the courtroom felt suspended for a moment, as if time itself paused to honor the journey she had endured. "You carried so much grief into this room," he said softly, "and yet you survived. That is courage beyond measure." She bowed her head. "Thank you for seeing me, not just my mistakes." The gavel struck lightly. It wasn't just a legal dismissal. It was a ceremonial acknowledgement of her resilience. The immigrant family's triumph. Amadou and his children returned as well, faces bright with pride. Caprio smiled and gestured toward the little girl, Masa. "Masa," he said gently, "do you remember the day you helped dismiss your mother's ticket?" She nodded eagerly. "I do, Judge. I remember. I told my little brother, 'Always tell the truth. Always.'" Caprio's eyes twinkled. "And your father?" he asked. "He drives carefully now," Masa replied with a grin. The judge looked at the family as a whole and raised the gavel. "Case dismissed. And remember, the city will always recognize honesty, courage, and care." The children clapped. Their mother hugged them. And in that moment, the courtroom became more than a place of law. It became a classroom for life lessons that would echo far beyond its walls. The veteran's final honor. Sergeant Paul Grayson, still in hospital garb, entered with his daughter by his side. Caprio stood, his own posture solemn. "Sergeant, your service to this nation has not been forgotten," he said, "nor has your dedication to family, even while facing your own battles." The courtroom listened in silence. "The fines for your recent citation? Dismissed, not as charity, but as recognition. Recognition for sacrifices that most will never understand." The man's eyes glistened. "Thank you, Judge. Truly, thank you." The judge nodded. It was a brief moment, but it carried the weight of decades. The acknowledgement that justice, when balanced with humanity, could be transformative. Melissa Turner's restoration. Melissa Turner, the woman on the edge, walked to the bench next. Her eyes were red, but determination had replaced despair. "Judge, I've started a job. I'm working toward an apartment. I want my children back someday," she said, voice firm. Caprio studied her for a long moment. She was honest, earnest, and fragile, but ready. "Ms. Turner, the law does not forget, but neither should it punish endlessly. You will have every opportunity to rebuild. Today, this record is cleared." The gavel struck. A weight lifted, not just from her shoulders, but from everyone watching. Justice had been served, tempered with mercy, and yet firm enough to demand accountability. The lesson in laughter. Even amidst the gravity, Caprio never lost a human touch. The young girl, Sophia, who had once bargained fiercely over her mother's ticket, returned to Courtroom with a handmade thank you card. "Judge," she said shyly, "I wanted to give you this. You taught me fairness is about love and honesty." Caprio's eyes softened. "Thank you, Sophia. You'll carry this lesson for life." He held the card to his chest. "Even the smallest hearts," he whispered, "can teach the greatest lessons." The ripple effect. By the end of the day, every case, every story had converged into a single truth. Justice, when tempered with compassion, does more than punish, it heals. Caprio looked out over the courtroom, now empty. The sunlight slanted in, painting the floor gold. "This is why I do it," he murmured. "Not for headlines, not for recognition, but for the human spirit, which is always worth saving." The gavel struck one final time, soft but decisive. And in that moment, everyone present, law enforcement, defendants, families, even distant viewers watching at home, felt it. Justice had been served, mercy had been honored, and the world felt a little lighter because one man chose to see the person behind the fence. The sun had begun its slow descent over Providence, painting the courthouse in shades of amber and gold. Inside, the air was calm, almost sacred. Judge Frank Caprio remained at his bench, surrounded by empty chairs and lingering echoes of laughter, tears, and gratitude. For a moment, he closed his eyes, letting the day's weight settle. So many lives had crossed this room, so many stories of struggle, courage, and redemption. And yet, even as the courtroom emptied, their presence remained, etched in memory like light on wood. Reflections on mercy. He thought of Andrea, the grieving mother, who had left with hope instead of despair. He thought of Amadou and Massa, who taught him that honesty transcends language and culture. He remembered Melissa Turner, the woman who had almost lost everything but found a chance to rebuild. And Daniel Murray, the man who had walked 5 miles with 92 cents, whose first act of gratitude became a lesson for the world. Each story was different, yet all carried the same message. Justice is more than punishment. Mercy is not weakness. Compassion is not charity. It is courage. Caprio reached for his mother's photograph, Philomena, whose name had graced a fund that had saved so many lives. Her smile seemed to glow in the soft afternoon light. "You always believed in the goodness of people," he whispered. "I hope I've honored that." The ripple of kindness. Outside the courthouse, Providence moved on. Cars passed. Children played. Life continued its ordinary rhythm. But within these walls, countless small miracles had happened. Tickets dismissed, fines forgiven, debts repaid. But more importantly, hearts had been lifted, faith restored, and hope rekindled. The ripple of kindness extended beyond the courtroom. Letters poured in from strangers. Donations arrived from those inspired to help others. And viewers from around the world were reminded that mercy and justice could coexist. It was proof. Caprio realized that one act of understanding could spark countless others. Proof that humanity itself could be restored, one person at a time. The moral of the stories. Judge Caprio had always known the law was not perfect. People are not perfect. Life is rarely fair. And yet, the greatest truth he had learned and taught through his actions was this: to judge rightly, one must see beyond mistakes to the human heart. To enforce the law, one must remember the lives behind every file. And to leave the world better than you found it, one must have the courage to care. As he looked over the empty courtroom, he felt peace. Not because the cases were closed, but because the hearts of those who had come here, broken, scared, hopeful, had been seen, heard, and valued. A final image. He tapped the gavel softly, a gentle rhythm echoing in the silence. The photograph of his mother remained on the desk, a reminder that love and fairness are inseparable. "Justice is not just a word," Caprio murmured. "It's an action, it's a choice, and it is always worth the effort." Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the steps of Providence City Hall. And as the courtroom emptied completely, it was clear the real victory was not in the fines forgiven or the cases dismissed, but in the lives touched, hearts changed, and hope restored. Closing thoughts. In a world too often consumed by rules, deadlines, and punishments, Judge Frank Caprio reminded everyone who entered his courtroom, and everyone watching at home, that mercy and justice are not enemies. They are partners. Honesty, loyalty, respect, family, and accountability. These are the principles that guided him, and the lessons that would linger far longer than any fine or ticket. And perhaps that is the true measure of justice. Not the gavel, not the law, not the punishment, but the courage to act with a heart that sees, understands, and believes in the goodness of people. As the doors of the courthouse closed, the city carried on, but inside, the stories remained, quiet, powerful, and eternal reminders that the heart of justice is mercy, and mercy is what makes us human.